know the consequences, and you know any of the alternatives that can come up from that decision. That is informed consent. And those are some big words, right? So 3-year-olds can't give informed consent. They don't understand. I'm going to go ahead and change these slides, right? So it's necessary and important for informed consent to take place if there's any type of sexual or partnered practice. For any type of sexual or partnered practice of pleasure, informed consent is mandatory. Before we get there, remember I said we're talking about womb to tomb here. And so womb to tomb, and I'll give you an example in my own life. I'm going to go ahead and click these slides. When we talk about from the womb, we're talking about little babies, right? And I just told you children are unable to give informed consent. Being a sex positive parent means that you are more like a food pantry versus a vault. So instead of keeping a lot of information locked away, where people have to get the right code to get that information around sexuality, we're a food pantry. People can come in and get what they need. As a sex positive parent, you have to evaluate your own values and beliefs and messages and see what you want to pass on. See what you want to share with your youth. When it comes to consent, I was so big on consent. My middle child just turned 6 on Saturday. And so 6 years ago, when she was born via C-section, came into the world. She did not cry. She smacked because she was hungry. So when she was born, she went, and to date, I swear she is the hungriest kid I have ever met. And it is lovely. And when she was 3 days old, she had to go into the intensive care unit. We brought her home. She was healthy. She was fine. She was a big baby. She ended up getting meningitis. And so she had meningitis. I took her to the emergency room. I will never forget that there were 18 fish and 4 octopi on the painted ceiling of this pediatric unit. And after her spinal taps and they confirmed she had meningitis, she had to be admitted to the PICU, so the pediatric intensive care unit. And I recalled, remember, I'm a sex positive parent. I want my kids to feel empowered, that the doctor needed to come in and examine her. And admittedly somewhat delirious because I also had just had a C-section and had been up for, I think, 2 days at this point. I think we made it to 4 days where I did not sleep. I told the doctor, you need to ask her consent before you examine her. On a 3-day-old, you need to ask her consent before you examine her. Makes no sense. It makes no sense. And I was like, you know what? That doesn't make sense, Lex. And I came back to it and I talked to the doctor. I was like, my bad. I didn't realize what I was saying. It didn't make a lot of sense. Thank you for checking out my kid. And my kid is fine now. Apparently, she had the record for how much snot was in her body for that size, but she is great. She is fully recovered, no deficits. But it was a thing where I'm like, ask for consent. You have to ask for consent, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to ask the 3-year-old if I can like check out your body for health. So let's give some tidbits about when we're talking about consent with youth, not youth, toddlers, babies and toddlers, because I also see people who want to be sex positive parents who are really trying not to input shame on their children, who are really trying not to have sex negative experiences. And when I say sex negative experiences, I'm not talking about intercourse. I'm talking about things with their body. I'm talking about things with their relationships. I'm going to go ahead and click these slides. So we can have children and toddlers practices their yes, their no's, and their maybes. They can even say, I'm not sure, right? And they can actually do this through a variety of ways, teaching them sign language, teaching them ways to show affirmation, having them go get something that they might want, or touch something that they might want, or point to something they might want, are all options for them to actually show consent, for them to show that they are interested in something, that they want something, or that they do not want something. Now, this is where we start to set up for failure, y'all. Sometimes when we want them to practice consent, we give them options in situations where they actually don't have options. When it comes to children, you do not give them the opportunity to practice consent if no cannot be an answer. Do you want me to change your poopy diaper? No cannot be an answer there. You have to get poop up off you. We can't just be sitting in that all day. It's not safe. It's not sanitary. It's not hygienic. It's problematic. It can cause rashes. It can cause a diaper rash, also like whelping and pain. We can't sit in that. We can give them options within it. Say, hey, I need to change your diaper. Do you want to go get the diaper or you want me to get the diaper? Or I'm going to change your diaper now. I'm going to use this wipe, or I can make a warm wipe or a cold wipe. You can give them options within it so they can practice decision making, but we do not give them the option to not change their diaper. It's time to change their diaper. It is necessary. The same thing goes for safety. So, hygiene and safety. We don't practice consent around. Do you want to wear your car seatbelt? Is not an option. You getting in this car, you putting on the seatbelt. That is how we keep you safe. So we do not practice consent around safety and hygiene. And sometimes they're going to be upset. They're like, I don't want to wear this seatbelt. I don't want to get in this car seat. I understand that. And in order for us to go anywhere, you have to wear your seatbelt. You have to be in your car seat. We must get to wherever we are going. So therefore, I'm going to put you in your car seat. It can be hard, yes, and it is necessary. We do not give chances to practice consent. So if they can't say no and you're going to respect that no, then it is not a consensual situation there. We're not picking up a consensual situation. Where I can tell you is how you can practice consent, and it's one of my favorite ways. So, tickling. I put a TikTok up a while ago. I did not know tickling was so triggering for so many people. Like lots of folks were tickled till they threw up or tickled to where they were so uncomfortable that they really don't like tickling now. Also for our neurodivergent folks, sometimes light touch can feel like little lasers or feel very uncomfortable. And so now, with more people being able to identify that they actually are autistic, we understand that that sensation wasn't really pleasurable for them at all. And so with tickling, again, it's one of like the most watched videos and trying to recover from the trauma of being tickled so much. I do a check-in, right? So I'm saying, is it okay to tickle you? They can say yes or no. If they say no, I'm absolutely okay. If they say yes, we tickle. So tickle, 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 and then we pause. And then we do a check-in again. Say, okay, we've tickled a little bit. Do you want me to keep tickling you or do you want me to stop? And then they say, yes, I want you to keep tickling me, or no, I want you to stop. Or they say, I want you to tickle me on my belly and not my neck. So we're teaching them this negotiation and communication around consent and access to their body. I know it's a big thing and it's also controversial. I also practice consent around affection. So I have a 7-year old, now 6-year old, and a 2-year old. And so again, I am a Southerner. I'm a recovering Baptist. So I was again raised in the South as a Baptist in a Black family where you had to go over there and give auntie or grandma some sugar, right? You had to give kisses. That was the requirement, and it's how you showed deference and respect. We don't do that. We don't do that around these parts. We don't do that in my family. We don't do that in my family of origin. And I've had to train even she's very proud of this. She's 77 now. My 77-year-old, oh, I'm lying, she's 78. My 78-year-old grandmother has even learned that, oh, wait, I need to ask for consent if I want affection. And so when she asked the kids, hey, can I have a kiss? And they say no. Originally, she started to pout. She go, oh, I can't have a kiss. I'm like, cut that out. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Because that's coercion. You're trying to manipulate their feelings to get what you want. Right? Now, that's coming from 79-year-old, technically great grandma, right? Try it on somebody who's a stranger. If a stranger did that same behavior to your kid or to you, would it be okay? No. No, creepy Mr. Raper person. You can't, like, no, you can't make them take care of you in that way. So then it's not okay also for our immediate family, right? So when we're talking about consent, they need to be able to say no. And our job is to empower their no's. But I also want to empower their yeses. And we don't really do that a lot, especially when it comes to sexuality. We're like, oh, yes, you said no, you refused this thing. That's great, right? Nobody's supposed to do this, this, and that. versus right now my kids are on this thing where they want their bellies out. And being a fat kid, having my belly out was a shaming experience, but they feel really good about their bodies and really good about their bellies. And at the beach, if they want to wear a bikini, that's fine because when else are kids going to be able to wear bikinis and it not be some big, big thing? And I'm like, I'm really glad that you feel good about your body and you were able to make this choice. This is an appropriate place to wear your belly out. Good job. So we're reaffirming their choices as well. Um, Nani says, what I find especially among women in their 20s often negotiate with themselves as opposed to the person. Right? And I think that that's important because it comes from a safety standpoint. And we're also taught to acquiesce. We're taught to give in, right? And that's so important because we're taught to please in order to be wanted. And some of that does come from safety too. I agree. Thanks for that. That's a really good point. So, when we're talking about informed consent when it comes to toddlers and little people, again, hygiene and safety, we do not negotiate around. That is not a consensual process. And they cannot give informed consent. If they cannot give informed consent, they cannot consent to sexual practices. Remember, because informed consent means an awareness of the consequences, the benefits, the pleasure, and alternatives. They cannot do it. They don't have the brain capacity yet to be able to do that. They don't have the prefrontal cortex. I don't care how parentified they are. I don't care how smart they are and how mature they are. They don't have it. Their hippocampus and their feel good feelings parts of their brain are bigger than their rational parts of their brain. They cannot think past the fun. They cannot think past to what could be risky. That being said, let's talk a little bit and shift to some growth activities and opportunities when we have different ages of understanding. So as kids start to get a little bit bigger, what does it look like when they're growing, right? And when they're able to practice informed consent. And this is one of my favorite things. So when we're talking about people give teens a really bad rap, but I love teenagers. I think they're really amazing humans. And they're starting to have some understanding and gathering of the world. And I wouldn't say just teenagers, I'd say probably 9, 10-ish in the world. And I'm going to age myself and I'm going to ask you all in the chat, what was first base when you were growing up? Like if we were talking about like sexual things, what's first base? I think the bases have changed based on generations, but what was first base? So I do have kissing. Okay, a kiss, right? Kissing. Oh, I don't know what IDR is. I know IDK. I'm old, y'all. Oh, I don't remember. Thank you. So kissing, right. So French kissing, very specific. So it's not the pecking, it's with tongue. Okay, so what's second base then? So French kissing or kissing is first. What's second base? And I think this is where we're going to start to get a little bit of difference. Second and third base were a little bit rough. Feeling up. Is this over the shirt or under the shirt though, Dr. Monique? Over the shirt. Fondling, touching breast, making out with touch. Third base is under. When did kissing get to be first base? Okay, so we have some people adding in the chat. So, okay, so third base, we have one person is touching up under the shirt. What's third base then? So we got kissing, we got touching. Third base is what? Oh, touching the vag, fingering, finger banging back in my day. Other genital touch, fingering. Okay, so we agree there. And then what's fourth base? What's home base? Like, look, fourth base. I play basketball. I don't play outdoor sports. So what's home? Is home? What's home? Home is the sexting. Look, I don't know where humping was in that either. Going all the way penetrative. It's the sexiness sex. So where's humping and where's oral in this? Right? So look, we have quite things have evolved, and now we have soaking. Right? Now we have all of these other things. So oral, yep, it's something in there, some type of sex, right? And then what would be a home run? We're taking this baseball analogy real far, y'all. I know. Consent, PIV, more sexing, more fucking. I got you. Ain't no home run. Humping can be clothes on, and it used to be called dry humping. Yes. And the big word is fraternizing if you want a big word for it. But yes. So we see it's all over the place, right? Now, I'm going to ask you to either out yourself or out your friends or your cousin if you ever wanted to have the chance. What age did you get your first kiss? First kiss. I was 11 and it was Torian. And my neighbor snitched on me to my mama. And she was like, she was looking out the window. She always looked out the window in her carport and she looked across. And my mama came home. She said, "Stop kissing boys on the front porch." And I was like, oh, dang, I got caught. And that was it because my mom was a sex positive parent. But we have a variety of ages 5, 6, 7, 16, 12, 6 to 8-ish. And I'll say 6 to 8 is actually quite normative, right? So, first kisses, you get your first crush, you're around socially with more kindergartners, first graders around that age. So, you're around more people. And if you grow up seeing affection, it is not abnormal to say, I want to emulate this affection. So, that's important to note. 12, 16 as well. Those seem to be popular ages. Um, oh, Dr. Shayla says, I don't recall. We was hunching in kindergarten. No. Yeah. In my neighborhood, we played I think it's called hide a girl, freak a girl in some places, but we call it hide and go get it. And so that was a 12-year-old thing. Like hide and go get it was a thing we did. I don't know what the other colloquialisms are, but it was catch a girl, freak a girl back then. And you didn't want to be the girl that didn't get caught because that meant you were ugly. Convoluted kids games. But that being said, exactly plain house. That's exactly where I'm going to go. I'm going to change the slideshow. Thank you all for engaging in that, right? So as we enter, Amina had mentioned us being some of the analog to digital kids, us using those chat rooms in AOL, and I was on, like I said, MTV chat real hard. But we see that our toddlers and young kids are playing house. They are playing that less now because of community feeling unsafe and people not having a bunch of rules around it. But as we see youth start to develop, right, we start to see them being online. They're doing some friendship building. They're starting to post pictures or wanting to have social media. Now they have apps that are specifically geared towards youth that allegedly are only supposed to have youth that are supposed to be on it. And we start to see that sexual curiosity starting to get piqued. So I won't use this right now. So what's happening and what we're seeing specifically research wise is that average onset of seeing pornography is usually at 13, but can be early as 9, especially if that kid is around other kids who are a little bit older. They're starting to see pornography at age 9 and explicit sexual images specifically, right? They're also starting to have access to social media. Now, we've all seen the family influencers that their kids have had a social profile since they were born, and now they're starting to branch off into their own profiles. But also, the relationships are happening online. So, I had a client who, 14-year-old queer femme, person of color, who had sent a picture to her girlfriend at the time, saying like, "Hey, I think you're so cute." It was her in a bra and a mirror, right? So she wasn't completely nude. And we've talked about trying to be safe online. But when they broke up, that ex posted her, this is gonna be a throwback for some of y'all, to hotornot.com. Do y'all remember that website? Hotornot.com. You put a picture up and people would comment if you were hot or not, and they would give you a rating between 1 and 10. Imagine being a 14-year-old girl and having your topless picture of you just in a bra online for the world to see. And now people are rating and commenting and picking you apart or hyping you up. And you've contacted the web and they won't take it down. And it's so hard to get anything taken down because the internet is forever. And so she had consent to have the picture. She didn't have consent to post that picture, to share that picture. And even as adults, we're guilty of this all of the time. We see something scandalous and be like, "Oh, let me send this to my friend. I send it to her on Instagram, but I got to send it to her on Facebook. I got to send them to them on Twitter." right? Oh, look at this TikTok, but we don't know if we had that person's consent to share that video. And so teens and younger youth are still navigating these consent practices. Well, what can I do with this picture? Can I keep this picture? Should I delete this picture? I said you could have this picture, and now that I have it, does that mean I own it and I can do whatever I want with it? These are really hard questions. And then they have all of that topped off with it's not sexy to ask for consent. We still have young, specifically youth that are men and boys identified as you just got to take what you want, right? That's what's cool. You don't ask nobody if you can kiss them. You just got to take it because people want people in control, right? And all of these narratives that are not true, that are false, that can be trauma inducing. And this is where consent comes into play. We have to talk about like it can be sexy to ask for consent. It actually might get you more of what you want if you ask for consent because that person feels safe. And so we have to teach our youth that, and both all gendered youth here, folks, not just boys, not just girls, yes, trans youth, yes, intersex youth, all youth have to practice consent. So we talked about that kissing and those pieces of like, hey, what are we doing? Right? We need to talk to our youth. How are you practicing consent online? Is it okay if I repost this? Do you want me to tag you if I repost this? How do I give you credit for this? Oh, I see this as something private. Is there something you don't want me to share with anybody else? So your ex is my friend. Do you want me to block them from this for you? So all sorts of types of consent need to be happening. And when we're talking about these consent practices, I don't want you to sit down and have one big kind of verbal vomit conversation. They're not going to tune in. The adult span, y'all have tuned out of this talk at least 3 times because I've been talking for 27, 29 minutes. So adult and youth attention spans aren't going to be as long as to have one verbal dump conversation. Have multiple conversations, and then we can approach what's our consent practice here? What do we need to implement as a family? What do we need to implement as parents? What do we need to implement for you specifically? I'm going to go ahead and change my slides. When we're talking about consent, I also want to bring up devices because this is big. And people are like, it's my phone and you don't have consent to go through it. And so I grew up in a house where if I couldn't pay for it, I couldn't have it. Right? So my 16-year-old self, I had had a job since I was 14. I went to Metro PCS. I don't know if that company still exists, but I went to Metro PCS and I paid my $25 and then I had a phone and I had a cell phone that I had to pay for and maintain myself. And matter of fact, when I was 14, I had to pay the cable man to come and put a landline in my room. And I felt really special because I had one of those see-through phones that lit up whenever somebody called. So I was like, Clarissa explains it all and really, really cool. But yeah, so it was, early 2000s. I was hype. That being said, though, the rule is if you have a device that connects to the internet, so this includes phones, tablets, um, I'm going to say Nintendos, Xboxes, PS, whatever number they're on, all of those things, then it is required to be able to check those devices. Period. Right? Because again, if the answer can be no, it's not true consent. If it can't be no, it's not true consent. Right? It has to be able to say no. You do not have consent over whether or not I check your device. Because remember, we don't give consent over safety or hygiene. And I'll tell you a story why. So there was a 14-year-old boy who was on an app. His mom knew he was on the app and he was using the app and it was for other 14-year-olds. It's like, one of those like mingling apps or something like that. He thought he was talking to a 14-year-old girl from Germany and he sent a dick pic. Sent a dick pic, right? Because we're flirting. It's fun. It's exciting. This is exhilarating. Turns out that that 14-year-old girl was actually a grown man in Russia and was trying to blackmail him for money. So he comes in very, very scared because this man has now said, oop, I have this picture of you. I'm going to share this picture of you with your friends list on Instagram if you don't send me this amount of money. It was a consensual picture thing, but it was deceptive because the guy was a guy and not a 14-year-old girl. And we ended up being able to like have that situation be okay. It turns out mom, is a badass and knew some people that were actually in forensic FBI. So they sent him back like his IP address and address instead of money. and backed off. But for any other kid that didn't have those same resources, that could have been really a problematic situation. So, yes, you have the right to check the devices. Even though it is in their ownership, you have to check devices. And when you're checking devices, I also want you to check the apps. Y'all, people are smart. They got a calculator app that looks like a photo album nowadays. There's all sorts of apps that are like secret chat apps, but it just looks like a note taker. Check the apps. Check what's going in and out and talk about that process before. The other thing is you never use it as punishment. You didn't piss me off. Give me your phone so I can check it. That's not fair. It's not fair. It's we agreed that I would check for safety, right? Not just because I'm mad at you. Now you can take the phone away, like that's a consequence. I don't really care about that. I do care about when you're doing your consent practices. And consent practice means that I'm going to take this away and check it to keep you safe. If it's outside of safety, if it's outside of hygiene, then we talk about consent. This also goes with doctor's visits. So doctor's visits, again, my kids are 7, 6, and 2. I've been to doctor's visits with teenagers, and we talk about what's going to happen because teenagers start to access informed consent. I will tell you my story. Again, Black girl in College Park, so a neighborhood that didn't have a higher socioeconomic status. When I was 16, I was not having active intercourse with any other human at all. But I was a bigger 16-year-old. I've always been a bigger person. I got booty for days. I'm dragging a wagon. I'm very proud of that. That being said, I went to the doctor and they told me that I was sexually active, even though I wasn't. And they asked my mom to go out the room. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. I feel comfortable with my OB. No big deal. And she was like, I'm going to give you this shot. And you're going to have to come back and get this shot every 3 months. And I said, why? I'm up to date on my vaccines. I got the MMR, the RMI, all the things I was supposed to get. I ain't supposed to get no more shots. I'm cool. And she was like, well, no, this is a different type of shot. It helps to keep you safe. And I'm like, but what is it for? And she's like, well, it's so you won't get pregnant. I'm like, get pregnant by who? Ain't no sperm coming near me. I'm good. And she was like, well, I'm going to give it to you and then we're going to reevaluate in 3 months. And I'm like, no, I think I'm good. Right. She didn't explain to me what the shot was for, the side effects of this shot. And for the folks who haven't like kind of picked up on it yet, it was Depo. She was trying to put me on Depo, on a birth control, even though I didn't have sex until I was 18 and engaged because you good Southern Baptist girl, right? And debutante. And she was trying to put me on Depo. And so I was like, I'm uncomfortable. I want my mom. But because I had the wherewithal to ask for my mom, and my mom walked in and she was like, what's going on? I'm like, she's trying to give me a shot. I don't know what that is. And so my mom picked up it was Depo. And she was like, she doesn't need that. She's not currently sexually active in that way. And I'm like, Like, what? Now, what happens if parents don't know? What happens if kids don't know? What happens if we didn't empower them to know about their bodies? And we do know that for Black and brown bodies, they are more actively put on long, they're more put on LARCs. They're put on birth control that is long acting. And oftentimes it is coercive. Even though Bill Gates paid for all of my IUDs, it was coercive because it wasn't informed consent. Thank you so much for all of the empathy. Yes, it wasn't appropriate. Thank you for being mad for me. And even though it happened years ago, the thing is, it's still happening because we don't have consent practices in place that are ideal. And we tell kids you need to stay in a child's place, but you also need to grow up at the same time. And that's mad confusing. Right. And I had an empowered no. Yes. Now, remember when kids said, don't say no to me? Y'all heard this before? You don't get to say no to me because you were a child, right? We disarm them when we take away their ability to consent. Yes, and kudos to mom for having my back. Yes, my mama is a fighter. And yes, it is super common in all sorts of medical and reproductive spaces, especially with our youth who are considered at risk, quote unquote, because the worst thing that can happen is an unwanted teen pregnancy, right? So that being said, we're checking devices. That is not a consent practice, that is a safety practice. A consent practice is, can I read through this text message thread or something like that? Maybe. But we're checking devices. And I want to make sure we're checking all Wi-Fi devices because we're keeping people safe. And that matters, even though they might say no. I'm going to go ahead and click this slide 1 second. So we're talking about rejection too, right? And so this is rejection all around for all people. When we're talking about rejection, because consent can come with a no. Can I kiss you? No. Can I hug you? No. Can I sit on your lap? No. One, I find that parents often feel guilty for telling their kids no, especially when it's an affection. And I want to give this specifically to postpartum parents and parents of high need demand kids. So this might be kids, again, that are on that have autism. This might be kids that have neuro disabilities and differences, kids who are high touch, because sometimes we are touched out. Stop touching me. Move. I don't want you on me. You're hot. Your body, you didn't brush your teeth. Get off. I don't want to be touched anymore. We often see this in loving relationships as well, where it's like, oh, I just want to be next to my partner. It's like, get off me. And I think that's so important to say that we also have consent practice. And our consent practice matters because not only are we modeling it, but we're whole humans too. The thing is, and what I am seeing in current society is we don't know how to handle rejection. And people keep acting out based on rejection because they take rejection as a personal term of worth. Where instead, here I'm going to click, rejection is really a way that somebody else takes care of themselves. I don't want to kiss you. I'm not in the mood to kiss you. I don't find that arousing and attractive. I haven't brushed my teeth. I'm uncomfortable. I'm not going to enjoy it. You might not enjoy it because I just had a bunch of like, I don't know, something you're allergic to. I'm allergic to seafood. My lover knows that if I want to kiss and he just ate seafood, he's not going to kiss me. I'm like, oh, you know what? I appreciate it. He's taking care of me, but also taking care of him because he doesn't want to have to deal with me having an allergic reaction. So, rejection is a way that a person is taking care of themselves. So when they say no, and when you say no, you are taking care of yourself. If you're on the other end of that no, it might feel like, oh, that's really uncomfortable. That sucks. I really wanted to kiss you. I really wanted to hug you. I really wanted sex. And I appreciate you taking care of yourself. Because respecting that no is a way to show that you actually care for that other person. Is a way to show I do want to be in a relationship with you, whether it's romantic or platonic, parental or familial. That no is empowered. I want to go to the chat. There's two long things. I'm a product of an unwanted teen pregnancy precisely because my mother didn't have access to empower or empowering sexual health knowledge. I think about it often, how much goodness this world would be without if this unwanted pregnancy were terminated. Wow, that's so poignant, right? And we see that having empowered choices can make a difference for somebody, can make a difference for their lives. Thank you for sharing that. That's a very intimate detail. I'm happy to know that about you, since I know you. Yes, my no supports me always. And it's something else I make sure not to weaponize in addition to the phone check. Yes, exactly, right? So no isn't punitive. We're not withholding because we're trying to punish, right? Which is a form of sexualization, people. Big word for manipulation using your sexual power. You ain't take out the trash, so no, you can't kiss me. That's withholding. And that's using it punitively, right? Actually, it's really hard for me to feel like sexually empowered when I can smell the trash. I feel kind of disgusted. I am not in the mood for like affection. It helps me out if that trash goes out. It's a little bit different than no, I'm punishing you because you didn't do something I asked. You see the difference there? It's nuanced, but it's different. The other thing is people take no's hard. We used to, and I'm sure some people in our lives still do, teach young, specifically male identified, masculine identified folks that her no is just a suggestion and you got to wear them down. And that meme has been going around for a while. It's like, I told her no. And it was like, yeah, I just got to keep trying. And they were like, no, don't do that. She said no. That no was the first time. And I will say in my own household, I do feel like the no is weaponized against me, but that's because I have habs of hating ass babies. And once I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna put y'all in a huggable shirt. You know, the big t-shirts that they used to do back in the day, like y'all gotta hug it out till y'all get along. Yes. So I don't know how to say it. I was a twin, am a twin. I had a twin. I had a twin, and so my mom would have us do that. And I was like, I'm gonna do that to y'all. And then my 7-year-old, and she was 5 at the time, looked at me and was like, Mom, but I don't consent to hugs that way. I said, God damn it. Fine. Fine. Good. All right. Well, we got to find another way for y'all to compromise. But she was right. She didn't consent to having to have like, to be forced to hug somebody. I was like, well, all right. Yes. Yes. Okay. Yes. I got you. So that consent process and that rejection, I had to respect that no. And she was absolutely right, even though I was really frustrated. So those no's are important. Empowering those no's are important. I'm going to go ahead and switch these slides. That being said, I want you to remember that when we're talking about informed consent, right? It's age appropriate for teenagers. And so for teenagers, they do need to start having that informed consent. And this is when a lot of people start to get in their kind of scruff because teenagers want to know why. And it's like, I don't have to explain to myself to you. Like, yes, you do. They're young humans. They're going to be adults. They do need to know why. I'm going to make this slide just a little bit bigger for you, right? So we need to be able to tell them the risks and the benefits and the consequences and the potential pleasure. That might make you feel really, really good. And the risk of sexual intercourse at this age is an unwanted pregnancy, a sexually transmitted infection, rumors about you being a hoe, because people at this age don't really keep privacy well, right? There might be people who look at you different. You might have to get on birth control, and there's a whole bunch of things about this, and that. So, when we're talking about if you want to have sexual intercourse or not, here are some risk benefits, here's some pleasure, and here's some consequences. Also, here are some alternatives. There's outer course, there's this, and that. But you have to give them all of that information. Um, Mackenzie said, I love it when they apply consent in real time, even when it feels inconvenient. Thank you, Mackenzie, for yes, we love that most days. Yes, absolutely. It's what we're training them to do. And April asked, I used to make my children stand in front of each other and say they loved each other until they begin to feel the love. I like it. I like it. We do a Gottman thing. I'll give you that right now. So for every one criticism or contemptuous act, we try and counteract it with five positives. So Gottman has a magic ratio, and the ratio says that relationships will fail if there are contemptuous or critical factors more than our intimate factors. And so it is a 1 to 5 ratio. So for every one incident that is harmful to a relationship, there need to be 5 incidents that are positive in order to counteract that one negative. And so we do that in our household. So I love that they have to affirm each other. My kids get tired of affirming each other, but they're working on it and they're kids and we're modeling, right? So with teenagers, and we need to let them practice. Also, we need to let them fail, and that can be really, really hard. People, I think maybe Amina grew up as a latchkey generation kid. If you're maybe an older millennial, you might have been part of that latchkey generation. Some of you are Gen Xers possibly, where you got locked in the house because your parents were at work. And so you kind of left to your own devices, right? So we were out trying not to get kidnapped, riding our bikes and whatnot. We were home for many hours of the day, maybe watching TV by ourselves. And then we have the overscheduled generation. So that is typically my generation. I am a geriatric millennial. We had to be everywhere and we had the helicopter parents. They were always hovering over us, trying to watch over us. And now we have parents that millennials have turned into bulldozer parents or snowplow parents. They try and knock down any obstacles in front of their children to knock them out the way so their children don't experience failure, so they don't have those perfectionistic ideologies and tendencies. I tend to think of myself as a bowling alley parent. So this is a newer term. If you're going to use it, please credit it to me. I am a bowling alley parent. So I set up the lanes and the pins for my kids to knock down. They still have to roll the ball on their own effort, but we decide if there needs to be guardrails up so they can have more success and when to take those guardrails away. And so knocking down one pin is successful, knocking down all the pins is successful. But we're trying to make sure that they have the strength to roll the ball down the lane so they can knock it out and they can feel that sense of accomplishment with or without the guardrails. And so it's my job to know that the lane needs guardrails or not. We can assess together if they're ready to relinquish some of those guardrails. And then their job is to knock those pins over. And I'm happy to reset the pins up however many times we need to reset them up because I'm trying to set them up for success, but they still got to get there on their own. That being said, and coming close to the end of time here, informed consent persists into adulthood, y'all. It doesn't just go away. And it is in all of our relationships, not just our romantic relationships, even though I have a lot of romantic pictures here, right? But for sexual relationships specifically, we need informed consent. It is what provides trust and safety. It's saying, hey, I want to tie you up with this rope. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Well, I don't really know what that means. Is this rope going to give me a rash? What type of rope is it? Did you get it from Dom Depot? It's something that sex therapists lovingly call Home Depot, right? So did you get it from Dom Depot? Can I wear my butters if you're going to tie me up? What are the risks? Are my legs going to go numb? We black. Do you know how to look for signs on black skin of safety or non-safety? What are we going to do with, are you taking pictures? Like, tell me more. I need to know. What's the risks of this? What's the benefits? I often am known for saying, stop letting random people choke you just because you thought it was cute because you read it somewhere or saw it somewhere. We need to know the risks and the benefits, right? We need to build foundational trust around informed consent. It's not something that we're just going to go in and jump in and do because everybody, every single person is walking around with trauma, whatever that trauma is. Oh, what is the comparison of informed consent and setting boundaries? So informed consent is the platform for boundary setting. Once I know all the things that go into something, now I can set the boundary. Hey, this is a risk of this behavior. You just told me that I might pass out if we're practicing any type of choke sex. So I don't want to pass out. That is a hard boundary for me. So if I'm starting to feel lightheaded or if I give you the signal, it needs to stop. And that is my boundary, right? If that boundary is crossed, I'm never going to let you do this again. We can end our relationship. I don't trust you, right? If you obey my boundaries, I'm going to feel really taken care of and supported. I might be willing to do this again with you, and that's going to be might be important for our relationship building and trust practice. So it sets the foundation. Once you understand all the things that go into this behavior, then you can say like, okay, here are my boundaries. Here's the risk I don't want to go into. Here's the benefits I'm really looking for. Thanks. Good question, April. Okay, with that being said, consensual practices. And these consent things can be sexy, right? So it's like, oh my gosh, I am so turned on by you. Can I just lay on your body? Right? I just want to smell your armpit. Whatever it is, whatever your thing is, yes. And you can ask for it and then give permission or get permission. That permission is safety building. It is long-term relationship building. And okay, maybe you don't want somebody stuck to you like Chuck. That's fair. It is cuffing season where I am. And you gotta like, go through your team and you're like, I don't want them, but you're still not going to violate their consent boundaries because that violation can be trauma producing and it can erode relationship and relationship trust. And it could be criminal, depending on how bad that violation is. Two more slides and we will wrap up. Switching them. So, conversational questions to discuss. I'm going to make this really big for you all and solid, right? Is no a viable option? If the answer is no, they can't say no to this, it's not a consensual process, right? And I will say right now, my 6-year-old is in a thing. She's like, you're always forcing me. And I'm like, today I am forcing you to do this because you need to wash your butt. Hygiene is not something we can argue about. You have to wash, right? You can't say like, no, I don't want to wash. I will give you options. Do you want a bird bath or a full bath? Those are your options. But no to taking a shower is not an option. Does this person understand the consequences? Do they understand if I do this action, here are the things that can happen to me? If that is something that they do not understand, it is not a consensual process. What are the benefits? Can they name benefits of this process? Right? And I love this in relationship therapy. I'm like, so what are the benefits of going with this? And when people are like, it really doesn't benefit me, I just feel devastated. I just feel depleted. So why are we continuing to do something that is harmful to us? Because they don't realize that consent is revocable. You don't have to keep doing it this way. And then what is the pleasure in the choice? Ignore my typo. But what's the pleasure? Is there pleasure to be had? Are you getting pleasure? Because pleasure is important. Pleasure is a birthright. And what's hard is sometimes medical professionals and the medical industrial complex doesn't believe in pleasure. They just want to keep you alive. pleasure is not a part of the conversation. So you can introduce that as an informed patient. You can also introduce that in consent practices at work. You can do that in consent practices in relationship. What's the pleasure in this choice? Right? Sometimes our bosses will offer things that are actually not consensual, but they want you to buy into it. And you can say like, "Oh, this sounds like you want me to do things, but it doesn't sound like I have a choice in it. Is that true?" And I'll be like, "Yes or no." Or they'll say, "You have a choice, but this is the consequence if you say no." So that is an informed practice. And then also, of course, what risks are there? Last but not least, if there's excitement, sometimes there might be excitement, sometimes there might not be excitement, right? And again, remember I told you, especially for people who are autistic, especially for people with neurodivergence, social anxiety, think Keith Lee, right? So Keith Lee be excited to try this food, but Keith Lee has social anxiety. So it doesn't necessarily always translate that Keith Lee is excited to try this food. It is okay if somebody's not exclamation point excited. April adds in the chat, children's programming on TV is saturated with sexual innuendos. With the introduction of surpassing no. Something I love for kids is actually called Baby Bus. It is a Japanese kind of anime style, similar to like the Coco Melon, but it actually has educational content, and talks about children and consent. And it says, hey, if somebody follows you in the bathroom, this is what you do. And somebody said, no, don't do that. There are also really good books around consent. You can go to sexpositivefamilies.com. I'll put that in the chat as well. For other Baby Bus, it's a whole series. Oh, thanks, Mackenzie. It's a whole series of just like animated things. They teach a lot of safety things. They teach like what to do in an earthquake. They teach you like what to do in a fire, not to panic. There's a whole song in my head I'm not going to sing to you because I can't carry a tune with a bucket. And there is also one where a stranger is following them into the bathroom and it says, what do you do? And it says, don't go off with strangers and you don't share like certain body parts with strangers. All of those things are true in that show. So I like that show. We watch that show in my own household. I want to posit that consent conversations are important throughout the lifetime. These do not just go away with new people, even with old lovers and partners. It is important to know that consent is always going to be a part of the process and a part of the trust building. And that trust building actually helps build intimacy because you're able to be vulnerable. If you are scared to say no, that is a yellow flag that something's up. Like, if I say no, will I be rejected? If I say no, am I unworthy? It is important to point out that that no should always be on the table when it's a consensual conversation, as should the yes. Your yeses should also be on the table. With that being said, and 5 minutes to spare, here is my contact information. I'm Lex Sexdoc across all things. That has an at. I don't have a Snapchat because it was hard, and I'm a geriatric millennial and I don't understand it. But I have a Twitter that I never use, and it will forever be Twitter. I have an Instagram and a TikTok. Instagram and TikTok are probably the most places that you will find me. And then you'll also see me on Facebook, and it's all Lex Sexdoc. And my email is info@lexsexdoc.com. Sheila, my shade of lipstick is from the Melanated Bar, because that is my soror. And this one is called Prima Donna. It is a deep purple profile. Well, no, I just really like it. So I bought like 6 tubes of it. So they have good sales. Use it, love it. Send me a picture when you wear it because I definitely want to see it on you. Thank you all so much. That is my time, and I will turn this back over to Ami. Oh, I can ask
Hey, I had a
any
question.
questions. Yeah, I was
I
like,
have
any
a question.
questions? Go ahead.
This is Kadera speaking. First off,
Hi.
my girlfriend says the Delta call thing, in the background. Because I was like, oh, she's a Delta.
Hey, soror. Okay.
She just did it again. She said, hey, soror. Yes, y'all are pooping at each other and neither of you can hear each other, but carry on. My question was the 1 to 5 ratio. What was that
Yes,
called or
so that
from?
is Gottman's um golden ratio for success.
Okay, thank
Mhm.
you.
No problem. Yep. It's for relationships. Gottman has the 4 horsemen of relationships. So if you think 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, there's 4 horsemen for relationships that come for relationships.
Thank you so much for that.
Of course.
Trying to diligently take notes, and I just like I got the information without the name of what the hell it was. If I
All
need,
good.
appreciate you.
Oh, thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you so much, Dr. Lex. That was amazing. Um, Definitely great seeds were planted today. And I want to thank everyone else for coming and attending today's talk. All of Dr. Lex's information and the resources that she mentioned will be in the resource guide, which you all will receive along with her books for purchase and any other things that we discussed in today's lecture. But fabulous, fabulous job, Dr. Lex. Thank you all. We'll see you guys at the next session. Just check your emails and you'll see when the next section is.
Thank you. Bye,
Okay.
folks.
Peace, everyone.
Peace, my favorite bottom bitch.
Goodbye.